to ask the First Minister what engagement she has planned for the rest of the week.
First Minister.
Among other things, I will be in Cardiff tomorrow for a meeting of the British Irish Council.
Kezia Dugdale.
Today, there was more delay and disruption on Scotland's rail network. At one stage this morning, 1/3 of trains were running late. Yet again, thousands of people were delayed getting to work. But earlier this week, the Transport Minister, Humza Yousaf, said it isn't a poor service. And in her answers to Ruth Davidson, the First Minister did what her government always does. She blames Labour and then talked about England. Does she really think that the thousands of people delayed at Glasgow Central today care what happened in 2002 or what's going on in Cornwall this morning?
First Minister.
Well, I am not particularly interested in what's going on in Cornwall this morning. I am very interested in what's going on in Scotland. And what has happened this morning, as members are aware, there has been a points failure affecting services to and from Glasgow Central. That failure has now been rectified. Now, I regret any delay and any disruption, and as I said last week, we apologise to anybody whose train was delayed because of that points failure. Unfortunately, these kinds of things do happen on our railways, and what is important is that ScotRail communicates properly with the travelling public, and that we make sure that the investments in our rail infrastructure to reduce the chances of these things happening in future. That's why the investment plan in operations, in infrastructure, in fleet are so important. So we will continue to take our responsibilities seriously. When I talk about performance under Labour, I'm not suggesting that that should in any way excuse poorer performance right now, but I simply put it we simply do that to put today's performance into context. So for the most recent period, the performance of ScotRail was 89.8%. It should be higher than that. But that is higher than in any one of the years under the last Labour administration. I say that simply to put it into context. So we will continue to make the investments and do the work necessary to improve our rail services. I think that is what the travelling public have a right to expect from us.
Kezia Dugdale.
I'm sure that was of great comfort to the people stranded on platforms this morning. But I am glad that the First Minister agrees with me that the service Scotland's commuters are receiving just isn't good enough, and that the First Minister thinks that passengers deserve better. Because in January, the price of regulated rail fares is due to rise. A passenger using an annual season ticket to travel between Edinburgh and Glasgow will have to pay £71 more next year. And that makes people even angrier. I think passengers deserve a break. And that's why today Labour is publishing a plan to freeze all regulated rail fares next year. Surely the First Minister agrees with us. Surely the First Minister agrees with us that people deserve a break. She has the power to give them one. So will she back Labour's call for a 2017 rail fare freeze?
First Minister.
Of course, we will consider any proposal that is put forward. We will particularly look to see how that proposal is being paid for, because we have an investment package that I have spoken about that it is important we are able to implement and deliver. Of course, we do not want to see rail fares increase any more than is absolutely necessary. That's why we at the moment have increases in rail fares that are at their lowest level since powers over railway were devolved to this Parliament since 2005. We see peak time rail fare increases limited to inflation. Off-peak rail fare increases are actually limited to inflation minus 1%. So that is the discipline we exert on rail fares. We will consider any proposals, but above all else, we will make sure we have fairness around the funding of our railways so that we can carry out the investments that are required to make sure that standards do improve on our railways.
Kezia Dugdale.
Thank you, President Officer. This is a serious proposal with means to pay for it contained within. And we asked the Scottish Parliament's independent experts to cost it for us. And they have estimated that it would cost as little as £2 million. Now, that's the equivalent of 2 months' profit, 2 months of Abellio profit. People are fed up with expensive, overcrowded and unreliable trains. And the SNP are desperate to talk tough about what action they might take in 2022, but passengers left stranded on freezing platforms this morning need a break now. So doesn't the First Minister agree with me that after weeks of misery, passengers in Scotland deserve to know that there is light at the end of the tunnel with a fare freeze in 2017?
First Minister.
Firstly, I've said we'll look at any proposal that is put forward, and I will stick to that commitment. But we've also been bearing down on rail fare increases already. As I said to Ruth Davidson, a much bigger proportion of the funding of our railways in Scotland comes from government funding as opposed to rail fares than is the case south of the border, and I think that is right and proper. But we will also make sure we plan the investment that is required to improve the infrastructure, to improve the trains and to improve the operation of our trains so that the kind of delays we are talking about just now are not seen in the future. That's the responsible action we will continue to take, and I think that is the action the travelling public have a right to expect. Yes, we will look at the option of a public service bid in future, but right now we will continue to focus on making the improvements that people want to see.